What's up guys, welcome back to Deep Training. I'm Louis and today we're going to be talking about combining strength and conditioning in our training. Do you need to do it and how can you do it? So you're going to leave this video with the understanding of three things. Why are so many people against it? Should you actually implement more cardio in your training? And how to actually do it in a way that's maybe a little bit more intelligent than what we might have done in the past. Stick around to the end of this video or skip a little bit ahead if you want to get to the juicy stuff about how to actually implement it. And at the end of the video, you're also going to get a basic template on how you can start applying this within your training. But to start off with, we're going to go down the little sciencey route that we like to go down because it's good to have an understanding behind these things. So where did it first start and why are so many people against adding cardio to strength training? Well, it all started in the 1980s by a study done by Hickson, and they were looking at, does cardio kill your strength gains? And what they found is, it does. But I'll ask you this question before I go on. If you are gonna put together cardio and strength, would you do 5 strength training sessions a week on top of 6 cardio sessions a week? And if you did, what do you think would happen? Guess what? They didn't make many strength gains because they added probably maybe a little bit too much together. So that was where the premise sort of started when it came to cardio killing your gains. And what we know now is it's not actually a full truth. Now, what I think, I'm not gonna be one of these people that comes out and goes, there is no interference effect, because there is. It's just not what you think. It's not that doing any cardio will kill your strength gains. It's because of 2 things. It's because of fatigue, and it's because of this other little thing called muscle tension. First one's a bit of a no-brainer, and I'm sure you already know it, but it's fatigue, and I'm gonna give you an example here. Tiffany, if you were to do a 3-minute hard out effort on this and then try to rep that bar on the deadlifts, do you think you'd get less reps than when you were fresh?
Yes.
Cool. I'm pretty sure you'd probably have the same answer, and that is because fatigue. Energy is finite. And energy is not just finite in a training session. Daily energy is finite. So if we go back and look at Hickson, and they're doing pretty much 1 strength session and 1 conditioning session every day to a higher limit, there's gonna be a lot of fatigue there. Let's say we only have 100 units of energy per day. We use 50% of those units for strength, we use 50% of those units for conditioning. But we're missing a real key ingredient here. Where's the energy that we're putting towards recovery? We forget about that is we cause stress in the gym. When we recover, that's when the gains are made. So it might need to look something more like we spend maybe 40% of the energy towards lifting, 30% of the energy towards conditioning, and we still need that additional 20% there in the back pocket for when we need to recover to make those gains. The next one's a little bit more complicated, and that's tension. But again, I'm gonna start with a question. Tiffany, you recently just did a powerlifting competition. How did you feel coming back from peaking for powerlifting, going back into conditioning?
Really unfit and really tight.
Now, the main thing she said there was tight, and that relates back to tension. So there's these things in our muscles called muscle spindles, and they are what allow our brain and our muscles to talk to one another. Now, these muscle spindles, they actually optimize the tension within our muscles towards what it gets used to doing. So if you get extremely used to lifting heavy, your muscle's probably gonna optimize itself a little bit more towards that thing you're doing the most of. And that's vice versa, the same with you do lots and lots of conditioning, your muscle's probably gonna optimize a little bit better towards that. Let's take someone like a yoga instructor, they're pretty floppy and pretty loose. They don't hold much tension. Take a powerlifter, they're pretty tight because they hold a whole bunch of tension. So if we're putting in both of these inputs at the same time, they're gonna start interfering with each other because your muscle's not gonna know what to do. And therefore, if we overdo it, progress on both parts is probably gonna be slowed down a whole lot. So back to Hickson, was he right? Well, I believe he was, but more due to his mismanagement of fatigue and tension, not cardio outright canceling strength gains. So should you do it? Now, this is where it gets tricky. Do I believe everyone should get some cardiovascular activity for general health? Yes. However, there is also a reason why the best powerlifters in the world are not running a world record marathon, and the best endurance athletes in the world, they're not deadlifting 300 kilos, because interference does occur, as I was talking about before. So if you're aspiring on either of these spectrums, ask yourself the question, as an endurance athlete, are you strong enough? And as a strength athlete, are you fit enough? These answers will be slightly different for both, but we can look at strong enough for the endurance athlete as a means of promoting robustness and injury prevention, and fit enough for the powerlifter as a means of promoting everyday cardiovascular health. For these 2 archetypes, these qualities would probably be in lower doses and more likely be a focus in the off season And when it comes to the on-season, we'd probably start pulling back on some of those things. Where my hard yes to this question really lies is to the people in the general population. CrossFit athletes, tactical athletes, or those with hybrid goals that want to lift heavy and run fast, but maybe not be the best at both. Here it's a no-brainer. These people should have, if not need, both. But where we go wrong, just like Hickson in the 1980s, we take all the things we want to achieve at once in regards to strength and cardio, throw them in a pot, give it a stir, and hope we come out looking like Ross Edgley. Whereas 9 times out of 10, we come out looking like this. Now we're going to go over the juice of the conversation. That's how to combine strength training and cardio within your program. There's plenty of ways to do this, but there's a few rules that I like to follow, which I'm going to go over. Rule number 1, ask yourself the question, what is fit and what is strong? Everyone's going to have a slightly different answer here, but knowing this is going to give you your starting point, because now you're going to have a comparison to your finish point. If we know that we want to achieve a 200 kilo deadlift and I deadlift 180 kilos, I know that I've only got 20 kilos to put on. If I now know that a 20-minute 5K is where I want to go and I run a 25-minute 5K, now I know I have to shave off 5 minutes, and now we can actually plan training instead of just kind of trying to do these two things randomly with no actual structure and goal. Now we've got our start and our finish point. How do we figure out in between? Well, adding strength and conditioning at the same time is all about training and maintaining. We need to find the quality that we can push more while we maintain the other quality. Let's think about the deadlift and the running. My deadlift is only 20 kilos off. So maybe a little bit more work is required on the running side of things. And it might also mean that I bias strength training a little bit more. So that might be easier for me to maintain because I pushed it so hard in the past. And on the other side of that, it probably means there's a lot of gains to be made on when it comes to the conditioning or the cardio side of the house, because I haven't touched it much. So the barrier to entry for my gains are gonna be far lower than the strength training that I've been pushing, maybe for a longer time. So train and maintain. Push one thing while maintaining the other. We have one going up, one maintaining. When you get to a plateau or when you get a little bit bored, that's when it might be a good idea to change things up. Probably the most important rule, that is polarize your training. And that comes to polarizing movement patterns and also the stimulus you're targeting. So if we're doing a whole bunch of heavy deadlifts, the conditioning that we might do on that day is probably not going to be something that's stimulating a similar pathway. So we might not jump on the assault bike and start doing a whole bunch of assault bike sprints that afternoon or that day, because we've already pushed that system. So we can polarize it, kind of like you do an upper lower body split when it comes to bodybuilding. We can think of the same when it comes to our energy systems. So if you push something really hard and fatiguing in the strength side of things, maybe do something slow on the cardio side of things, and then vice versa. This polarization, as I said, also includes movement patterns. So like I said, when we're talking about the bodybuilding, when we had the upper body, lower body split, we can think of the same thing with our conditioning. Let's say I'm training arms. Well, maybe my conditioning is a little bit more leg bias for that day. Or maybe it's a week where I'm going for something extremely heavy on the lower limbs, like a squat. Maybe I might do some ski erg or something like that, or a little bit more upper body endurance training for that week instead. So polarize your training. Polarize it when it comes to movement patterns, polarize it when it comes to the stimulus you're targeting. Auto-regulation. If you're doing your strength training, you're not using reps in reserve, RPE, even for some of our conditioning stuff, well, you're gonna have a really bad time. Because fatigue, like we said at the start, is the real interference here. And what auto-regulation methods like RPE and reps in reserve do, they allow us on those days that we feel pretty shitty to pull it back a little bit, still get a little bit of a stimulus in, and for those days that we feel really good, maybe we can push that little bit harder. So auto-regulation. And the final one is going to be track your progress. We need to know what's going on. We need to know if things are going up, if things are going down. So that is why it's always a good idea to have some markers of some things you're pushing for, because that's going to dictate your training going forward. So track your progress. So there you have it, a little bit more understanding around things like the interference effect and why we might be a little bit more adverse to adding cardio into our training. Where did that come from? And should you be doing it? Do you fall under that umbrella? Most of you probably do. And a little bit of a thought process on how to do it, following my rules, which you can screenshot just here. And like I said at the start, here is a basic week layout that you can also screenshot, have a play around with it. Maybe it'll give you some ideas on where to start with your own training. And if you'd love to know more, please reach out to myself on my Instagram or the Roba Instagram as well. If you enjoyed this video, please please give it a thumbs up, give us a subscribe, and if you had any questions, chuck a comment down the bottom. Thank you for joining us again on Deep Training.